Hello. Oh, there we go. Maximum volume, maximum energy. Thank you to GFI for putting on this great conference. Ton of energy already this morning, especially in this room. So much energy that I would try to not breathe if you can. Keep it quiet in here because we got some really exciting content to discuss. Thank you also to GFI for putting on this great session about the intersection of alternative proteins and health and nutrition. And I think we're gonna go a lot more in depth than just adjusted amino acid scores here and take a really broad view of what health, what nutrition means, and hear from some really great experts from a variety of fields as it relates to that. My name is Nate Crosser. I'm a principal at Blue Horizon, which is an investor in about 70 alternative protein companies. So for an overview of the next about 90 minutes in this room or so, we'll focus on the powerful existing benefits of alternative proteins, both to our bodies and also our societies as compared to conventional meat, how we can communicate those benefits, and areas that we can improve upon those benefits. I think we all see this as a really important both marketing and impact opportunity to improve the public health and nutrition system through alternative proteins. And I really think that this is a fourth pillar of the possibility for alternative proteins alongside creating products that can compete on price, taste, and accessibility. We can also make products that are healthier than conventional products, and it's one of those areas where I think conventional proteins can't follow us on this path that we're on in terms of creating a really strong value proposition for the products that we're making. So just a few really quick stats from a 2022 survey of 3,700 consumers in 7 countries by the Boston Consulting Group and Blue Horizon that I think set the tone for this session well. One fact was that in every country except France, the #1 motivator for consumption of alt proteins among the cohort was health. Another fact, nutritional concerns were the #1 inhibitor of more frequent alternative protein consumption of alt protein consumers, slightly ahead of taste even. And then lastly, 50% of consumers in the survey reported increasing their consumption of alternative proteins during the COVID-19 pandemic, mainly because of greater health consciousness is what they cited there. So I think this shows that there's a strong health halo to alternative proteins, and it's an area worth defending, communicating, and improving upon as we kind of enter the next phases of the industry. So we will break down this session into kind of 2 overarching parts with 2 separate panels. The first part of the discussion will focus on personal health, or maybe we could also call it nutrition, primarily as it relates to alternative proteins, and we'll hear from Ethan Brown of Beyond Meat and Dr. Christopher Gardner of Stanford. They're each going to give a short presentation, and then the 3 of us will have a short conversation to dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics. And then part 2 will focus on public health. So this is topics like food safety, security, disease, et cetera, as it relates to protein production and consumption. And then in that session, we'll start with an introductory primer from Brent Kim of the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, before we have a panel discussion with Tess Kelly of Corn, Sarah Ham of the Every Company, Amy Chen of Upside, Dr. Aryé Elfenbein from Wildtype, and as well as Brent. So without further ado, I say let's proceed with part 1. We'll first hear from Ethan Brown, who's going to provide a primer on some practical examples of these issues or opportunities from the Beyond Meat perspective. And I will provide a short introduction to Ethan and Beyond, though it might not be strictly necessary. So Ethan Brown is the founder and CEO of Beyond Meat, a company dedicated to building meat directly from plants, founded in 2009. Beyond Meat is a true pioneer in our field, and I'm sure many of us have enjoyed the products. They sell at nearly 200,000 retail and food service outlets in over 75 countries. That really stood out to me. With a variety of SKUs, including their newest innovation, Beyond Steak, which was named a Time Magazine 2022 Best Invention, received the Good Housekeeping Nutritionist Approved Emblem, and was a People Magazine 2023 Food Awards winner, underscoring Beyond Meat's commitment to make products that not only taste delicious, but are better for you, which is a huge emerging category in the food space. Ethan holds an MBA from Columbia University and an MPP from the University of Maryland, and he's on the board of the American Cancer Society's CEOs Against Cancer LA chapter, as well as being a member of the 2017 class of Henry Crown Fellows within the Aspen Global Leadership Network at the Aspen Institute. So, Ethan, I'll now invite you to take the stage. And you got a hot mic.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, first and foremost, it's wonderful to be here among friends. I look out in the audience and see so many folks here that I admire and have worked with, including my friends from Upside Foods, which I think is a terrific company run by a really wonderful guy. So it's good to be here. It's great to be here with my friend Christopher. We've done a lot of work together over the years, and anyway, so I'm going to dive in. I have no slides, so I'm going to just talk. After a meteoric rise, the plant-based meat industry is experiencing turbulence in what is a turbulent time. Critics, competitive forces, and short sellers are having their day in the sun. Yet the cynic's sun, a natural cycle seen in the history of innovation, will set over time, to be followed by a dawn of renewed growth. There is an inevitability in what we are doing, and our job today is to survive, advance, and then grow anew. As we know, the plant-based meat industry currently suffers under the dark, poorly defined, and politicized cloud of being a processed food, a product offering once deemed a breakthrough in human dietary health, with 50% of Americans in 2020 understanding it to be so, only for that number to dwindle to 38% in 2022. My guess is today it would be lower. This cloud is unlikely to clear overnight, and it's not there on its own. Incumbent industry groups, the merchants of doubt, are well at work here, putting millions of dollars across newspaper ads, TV spots, blogs, op-eds, and paid influencers to elicit fear, confusion, and complacency among the American consumer. Fake meat, real chemicals is the refrain, faithfully banged out by hired guns on keyboards here and abroad, with a cadence that is as predictable as it is frequent. There is something clarifying in this moment. The battle lines have been drawn, and our work ahead is defined. We must, as a category, unite around a single and powerful message that takes back the narrative of our process and ingredients, celebrates them, and educates the consumer on the transformative health outcomes that are available through a plant-based diet that includes plant-based meat. This effort must center on the proper point of comparison for our products. The choice facing the everyday consumer in America is not whether to have plant-based meat or a kale salad, no matter how many elite foodies clamor that it must be so. I find their position to be simultaneously classist and naive in its ignorance of the cultural, socioeconomic, historical, and even evolutionary realities, and reckless as it plays right into the hands of those who are putting profit over public health. The day when I, along with thousands of other Laker fans, pour out of Crypto Arena to be met by food carts peddling, not by food carts peddling industrially produced sausages and hot dogs, but rather lentil soup and cauliflower dips, is neither near or even remotely probable. Nor is the choice between plant-based meats and that organic hen that you might slip into the back of your stroller as you breeze through the neighborhood farmer's market, warmed by the sun and a freshly poured double latte. Don't get me wrong, I love the local food movement, and I love farms. I have a farm, having bought it from my father, and I cherish it. Farmers are among the hardest working entrepreneurs in the world, and my lifelong respect and admiration for them runs deep, as does my belief that these families should be embraced as some of the strongest fabric of our country. But let's be real. The vast majority of our meat does not come from John Arable's farm. And the sooner we stop pretending it does, the better off we will be. It is made precisely where it cannot be seen, in factory farms and industrial complexes, from which over 90% of the meat consumed in the United States comes from. And this output, the industrial meat that comprises the vast majority of animal meat reaching the consumer's table, is the proper point of comparison. To put it simply, we must relentlessly draw the consumer back to this comparison. We must constantly recenter the comparison with the data and facts, not hyperbole, judgment, or disrespect. Such tactics will simply distract and undermine from the truth and are not fair to the many good people working within the animal protein industry, many of whom have steadfastly refused to take part in the smear campaign against our sector. Now with that, let's widen the aperture for a moment to gain proper perspective. For some time now, the Anthropocene Working Group, AWG, a team of 35 or so scientists from around the globe, have been seeking to identify the development that best marks the passing of our planet from the Holocene, the current epoch dating back to the last significant ice age, to the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene, coined by chemist Paul Crutzen, is meant to capture our new reality where human activity is the dominant force shaping climate and the global environment. In an effort to find a single event or occurrence that best demarcates the onset of the Anthropocene, the AWG is evaluating such developments as the 1952 testing of the hydrogen bomb, the widespread use of artificial fertilizer, and the proliferation of global pollution from the burning of coal, among others. One other marker that has been under consideration and is germane to today's discussion is the broiler chicken. Writing in the Royal Society of Open Science, researchers make their case for the broiler chicken as the defining symbol of the beginning of the Anthropocene by arguing, and I quote, that the skeletal morphology, pathology, bone geochemistry, and genetics of modern broilers are demonstrably different than those of their ancestors, while observing that these modern artifacts are unable to survive without human intervention, even as their 22.7 billion standing population exceeds by an order of magnitude that of the largest population of wild birds, the red-billed quail, at 1.5 billion individuals, 22.7 to 1.5. The genetic design effort with regard to the modern broiler has focused intently on changes in the growth axis, producing a 5-fold increase in weight since the middle of the 20th century. Unlike natural evolution, these changes are not there to serve the animal, but instead are profit-driven. When researchers evaluate the effect of increasing their slaughter age from 5 to 9 weeks, they found a 7-fold increase in mortality rate, given the unnatural body structure and accompanying genetics. It is versus these and their mass-produced swine and cattle counterparts that we must insist upon as the basis for comparison, because these products are what the vast majority of Americans eat. When we do this, we must be entirely transparent about our processes and ingredients. Hide nothing. Be proud of the process and ingredients that you use. It is a better, cleaner, and safer process for getting meat to the center of the plate. Hang a shingle on the door of your facilities that says, "All are welcome." Give tours. Post videos explaining your process. Be proud of it. It's a better one. When someone rehashes the processed argument, politely ask them to be more specific in their concern. Using a Beyond Burger as an example, I would ask, is your concern added sugar? We have none. Is it saturated fat? We have less than animal meat. Is it sodium? We have the same as a seasoned burger. Is it possible weight gain? Point them to the swap meat study that you'll hear about next, where participants lost weight during the Beyond Meat interval. What is it? Polyphenols, phytonutrients? Let's talk. Let's do so in the right point of comparison, relative to the animal meat which we are replacing. At Beyond Meat, like so many companies in our sector, we use a process of heating, cooling, and pressure to assemble plant-based proteins in the structure of meat. At this level, it involves a breaking and resetting of pounds of protein in plant matter to resemble the fibrous architecture of animal muscle, and then using mixers to add flavors, binders, vegetable fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. Our most recent launch, Beyond Steak, does this process with the following ingredients, and please listen carefully to these ingredients. Help me find the boogeyman. Water, wheat gluten, fava bean protein, expeller pressed canola oil, salt, natural flavor, and less than 1% of garlic powder, onion powder, pomegranate concentrate, yeast extract, sunflower lecithin, fruit, and vegetable color. Other products use similar ingredients and processes, as well as inputs like coconut oil and methylcellulose. The latter, methylcellulose, is a form of vegetable fiber to which carbon has been added. It's been approved for over 5 decades by the FDA, and any serious health professional will tell you it's uncontroversial. Though a longer word, I greatly appreciate methylcellulose, as it allows us to build healthier meats. Meats free from cholesterol, lower in saturated fat, free from antibiotics, free from hormones, meats that do not rely on feeds that contain heavy metals, and meats that do not fall subject to the carcinogen warnings of the World Health Organization. Let me now turn more thoroughly to the health outcomes of plant-based diet that include plant-based meat. Across the country, at colleges and universities, as teams prepare for the year of practice and competition ahead, athletes are run through rigorous tests to identify possible underlying health conditions. In the Southeastern Conference, better known as the SEC, one of the participating universities put their men's basketball team through just such a series of tests this summer. Following the collection and analysis of blood work from each player, the doctor made a comment to the coaching staff that one player's blood was in particular a positive outlier. This player is my son, an incoming freshman who holds the distinction of eating more Beyond Meat than any human being on the planet. Mind you, I am not suggesting that Beyond Meat is singularly responsible for his blood work. Rather, I believe that it is influenced by his plant-based diet, one which is made sustainable by Beyond Meat. If you live in America, the actual America, that is cash-strapped, rushes to work, and grabs meals before and after kids' games, and keep a plant-based diet, you know how true the sustaining role is. You know. This story is, of course, an N of one and should not be in and of itself convincing. Perhaps more interesting are the health outcomes of communities where plant-based meat have long played a role in diet. Consider, for example, the vegetarian communities of the Seventh-day Adventists. In the 1890s, Harvey Kellogg began making rudimentary plant-based meats for patients at the sanitarium in Battle Creek. While they didn't reach mainstream consumers, his products and their derivatives have served an important role for well over a century in the Seventh-day Adventist community. Of the 5 communities, and just listen to this, of the 5 communities studied for the blue zones, those communities with the unusually high number of centenarians, that's a blue zone, only one was located in the United States. That community is Loma Linda, home to a thriving 7-day Adventist community. It's also one of the early institutional buyers of Beyond Meat. While it would be unscientific and inaccurate to ascribe their longevity to plant-based meat, it is yet another directional clue that a plant-based diet that includes plant-based meat has potential to do very special things for human health. And this is where peer-reviewed studies come in, and the work we're doing with third-party health institutions such as the American Heart Association, who recently certified the aforementioned Beyond Steak as a heart-healthy food, the American Cancer Society, with whom we have a multi-year agreement to advance research on plant-based meat and cancer prevention, and of course, Stanford School of Medicine, from which you will hear shortly. My request to any and all institutions that we work with is the same. Be rigorous in science and tell it like it is. We're here to improve human health and are hungry for data to improve our products. In closing, let's revisit history for some lessons and assurance of our bright future. In the first half of the 1800s, an enterprising man named Frederick Tudor, living in Boston, gave birth to a promising business. Known as the Boston Ice King, Tudor's enterprise specialized in cutting blocks of ice from New England's cold lakes and shipping it south to perform the various functions of ice. In 1851, an entrepreneur by the name of Dr. Don Gorey sought to commercialize mechanized refrigeration and produce what was then referred to as artificial ice. Ridiculed by the press, the New York Globe calling him a crank, Dr. Corey and his invention were also subject of an intense smear campaign undertaken by the incumbent industry. Tudor was said to play an active hand in this campaign, with his biographer remarking that the Boston Ice King stated that moral causes had been brought into play to prevent this machine's use. Apparently, these moral causes included spreading the rumor that artificial ice was replete with pathogens and therefore unsafe. Only later was it revealed that ice harvested from lakes, reflecting contaminated waterways, in fact harbored those pathogens. Despite incumbent industry efforts at sabotage that destabilized its early ascent, the mechanized ice industry ultimately flourished, aided by scale, cost reduction, and some exogenous factors such as the Civil War and periodic warm winters that decimated the northern supply of harvested ice. As others have pointed out, including Synthesis Capital, this brief battle between incumbent and insurgent industry is a fitting analogy for our emerging category, and it should imbue you with the confidence that our detractors in their dark cloud of misinformation and fear will give way to truth and sunlight. Until then, our job is to survive and advance and bring forward the healing and restorative power of plant-based meats for the benefit of human health and for the benefit of the planet and the life with which we share it. Our job is to be fearless in the face of opposition, to reframe the comparative set, to court transparency and demand it of others, and know that we are on the right side of history. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Ethan. What a powerful message and call to action for our entire industry. I hope we get a transcript of that incredible speech so I can make a banner of it. Now to the second part on our kind of second presentation of the first part. We're very excited to have Dr. Christopher Gardner come give a presentation about the swap meat trial that Ethan had just mentioned. A few words about Dr. Gardner. He holds a Ph.D. in nutrition science and is the Renborg Farquhar Professor of Medicine at Stanford. He's a co-author of the 2019 ADA Consensus Report on Nutrition Therapy for Adults with Diabetes or Prediabetes, the current chair of the American Heart Association Nutrition Committee, and serves on the 2025 U.S. Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. For 30 years, his research has examined what to eat and what to avoid for optimal health. This includes more than 20 nutrition intervention trials conducted with over 2,000 participants. The primary study outcomes in these trials are typically cardiometabolic factors, such as insulin, glucose, lipids, blood pressure, inflammation, immune function, and body composition. So, Dr. Gardner, we welcome you to the stage to talk about the swap meat trial. And I think you'll know he knows what he's talking about based on the fact.
Okay, thanks for having me here. I'm looking out at the audience and don't really see any friends. How many? A couple maybe. How many of you have PhDs? How many of you have MDs? Oh, I'm not going to get away with as much as I thought. Okay, anyway, I'm a geek in the room here. I feed and bleed people for a living. And years ago, I was looking at the New York Times and there were these, slides up now? Do I just have to click? Oh, look at that. Okay. I saw these dog food comparisons saying, oh my God, look, it's just like dog food, and the saturated fat will raise your cholesterol, sodium will raise your blood pressure, and the ultra-processed food will make you gain weight. And I thought, wait, that's my job. I do this for a living. I could do this. That's an answerable question. And nobody had really been answering that question. So we designed the swap meat study. I hope you saw the acronym there. We're very proud of the acronym. Take just a minute to let that sink in. Okay? All right. Sunk in. Thanks to lots of amazing people who helped me. So let's talk about what it's better for. It's obviously better for the environment and better for animals. But is it healthy? I mean, what part of health? There's lots of different ways to look at this. So, and the most important question is what Ethan referred to, healthier than what? So one of my favorite sayings in nutrition is instead of what. It's not just, hey, Professor Gardner, is this good or bad for me? What are we going to have otherwise? So we published this a few years back. We had a lot of fun running this. here is a testable hypothesis. If they eat that for this much time, something will happen. That's testable. You can do a study like that. For anybody who likes study design, it was a crossover study. We picked 8 weeks. Could we have picked 10 years? Yeah, that would have taken too long. Could we have picked 3 or 4 months? Didn't need to. We were trying to change cardiometabolic risk factors, blood pressure, blood cholesterol, things like that. You can do that technically in 2 weeks, but 8 seemed safer. So we've got 36 folks to do both in random order, and took a lot of blood, and we got poo and everything for the microbiome, and this is a really busy slide that you need to see at the bottom. There was 18 in each group. Really, 284 wanted to sign up for this study until we told them all the pooping and bleeding they had to do. And really only 38 joined, but 36 out of 38 finished the whole thing, which is pretty good in my world. And so the idea was you're going to have at least 2 servings a day for 8 weeks of these. And is it just burgers? No. There were really lots of varieties of products that Beyond was offering. So he said, okay, let's see if we can get a similar product to match each one. And just for fun, let's sort of look at some of the no-brainers there. So if you're looking at calories, they were almost identical. I have other slides to show, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you because you'll get the point. In terms of carbs, oh my God, don't be carb-phobic on me here. So yeah, the meat doesn't have any carbs, although one of those at the bottom does. That was actually the spices in the sausage. Yes, Beyond Meat has carbs, okay? Protein, virtually identical. And just because I like to take every advantage I can, all friggin' plant foods have all friggin' 20 amino acids, okay? They're not missing amino acids. Gardner, Google, Stanford, podcast. I have many hour-long rants on that, but I don't have time today. Saturated fat, yes, that's coconut fat, and it's less than animal fat. How about fiber? No fiber in meat, fiber in Beyond Meat. So all that seemed straightforward. Sodium, okay, some of the sodiums were similar, like sausage-wise they were similar, but in just the crumbled beef or the patty, it was higher. However, when we did the whole experiment to look and see what the sodium levels was, guess what? When we delivered the patties of ground beef or those kind of crumbles, the people salted them. So they ended up being identical overall in sodium. So absolutely identical in calories, protein, and sodium, different for saturated fat and fiber. If you were to show that to me, I would tell you which one would metabolically win. It was really interesting that the sodium was the same. So in terms of how many servings a day they got for these 16 weeks, more than 2 servings a day. These were generally healthy adults who wanted to be in a scientific study. Okay, drum roll, please. Okay. So a lot of you don't know what TMAO is, trimethylamine oxide. It's sort of an emerging cardiovascular risk factor. We picked that as the primary outcome, but we measured lots of other things. For those of you who don't know statistics, there's a probability value that tells you how probable it was just due to chance versus something real. And as the probability number gets smaller, that means there's a good chance it wasn't by chance. It was real. So really what you want is 0.0000001. So the TMAO dropped. 0.002 is a big deal. 0.05 is the cutoff. And here's the quick explanation of what TMAO. Basically, meats have choline and carnitine that go to your gut. There's some gut microbes that transform that, the choline and carnitine to TMA. And then when it gets absorbed and travels in your circulation, goes to the liver, it gets oxidized, and it's called TMAO, trimethylamine oxide. Don't need to know that for today. There will not be a quiz after this. So this was really interesting. Of all the sort of statistically significant findings, and we had 3, weight was the most statistically significant. Not the most clinically relevant, but the most statistically. And by that, I mean they lost 2 pounds on Beyond Meat versus red meat in only 8 weeks. The reason it was the most statistically significant is it was very consistent. Like everybody lost 1 or 2 pounds. It wasn't that some gained 4 and some lost 6. So it's not a very clinically relevant number. I wouldn't say this is a good weight loss diet. I can't tell that after a year you will lose 30 or 40 or 50 pounds. But pretty interesting, because that's the opposite of what people were saying. They were saying this is going to lead to weight gain, and if anything, it went in the opposite direction. And then LDL cholesterol makes total sense. So this is one of our primary risk factors for cardiometabolic issues, and the saturated fat was lower, the fiber was higher, and they lost weight on it. So no brainer that LDL is going to get better. So all 3 of the things I highlighted in yellow got better. The blood pressure didn't change, but that's really important, isn't it? That it didn't change after all the slamming they got for being high sodium. So this is like a whole win. So there's one really odd thing with trimethylamine oxide, and so this remains to be decided. These are all the lines of the 36 people in the study. And if you look on the left, half of them did plant first, animal second. If you look on the right, they did animal first, plant second. Now, I don't know if you can see a thicker black line in the middle of all that. So look on the right, and you can see on the right side, as they're on animal meat, their TMAO is rising, then they switch to plant meat and it drops right away, stays down. If you go the opposite order on the left and you start with plant meat, it goes down just a little, and then they go on animal meat, and it, WTF, what happened? Oh my God. So we looked a little in the literature. We still have to track this down. But it could be that if you go vegetarian for 8 weeks, then you can eat meat the rest of your life because you'll be cured. It doesn't really say that. We do think we probably changed the microbiome, which led to less of an opportunity to convert the carnitine and choline to TMAO. We have some poop experts looking through the poop in the microbiome right now, so wait for that follow-up publication. Justin and Erica Sonnenbergs are world-famous microbiologists, and Kate Ward is our amazing postdoc who's working on this right now. To be continued. In conclusion, there's my timer that I have 1 minute left. Perfect, we're in sync. Okay, we only found positive health effects and no negative effects. After all those New York Times full-page ads slamming them, it's testable. We did it. It's not even rocket science. It's just nutrition science. So, piece of cake. And then the TMAO we want to follow up on. That seems kind of cool, and we get a lot of poop from people these days. So let's see how that goes. That's what I wanted to tell you, but it'll be more fun discussing it. Let's bring science to this. Thanks for having me here.
Okay, sounds like we're good to go now. All right, yeah, we got about 10 minutes to ask a few follow-up questions here. So it seems incontroversial that plant-based meat, particularly Beyond Meat as they formulate, is healthier than the alternative. So Ethan, what can we do practically as an industry here to combat misinformation or share these kinds of important narratives that you highlighted?
I think the most important thing is to be proud of your process and your ingredients. Explain them to people. Don't allow them to be characterized by others. So take back this narrative, set up the right point of comparison. We have been quiet because we've been focused on other things. But as an industry, we all need to come together now. It is a cleaner, safer, healthier process, period. And we should be showing that. We should be proud of that. The other thing I wanted to say just about Christopher and the work we're doing there and all the work we're doing in this area is we have the opportunity to continue to improve the health profile of our products. And so the data that we're getting, as I mentioned, we're not just sitting on it and sort of smugly saying, see, I told you. We're saying, how do we make this even better? How do we make it even healthier? Because when you start with a blank canvas, not only about what you leave out, which we can continue to try to leave out more saturated fat, we can continue to try to reduce sodium, things of that nature, but also what can we include to make this even healthier for the human body. So these are early days. It's a lot of fun to work with folks like this, and we're going to continue to do so.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, in terms of additional things that we can communicate to consumers from a value proposition perspective, Dr. Gardner, is there anything else that you wanted to highlight in terms of the health impacts of plant-based meat from what you're seeing in the literature in terms of impact on microbiome, other biomarkers, impacts of fiber and how that might impact the fiber deficit, et cetera?
Yeah, I definitely think the microbiome is a fascinating one to look at, although I'm a little worried the commercial side of this is getting ahead of the science. We really don't know how to personalize the microbiome yet, but it is a hot topic in my field, every conference I go to. And fiber is the big feeder here. Maybe you'll get some fermented food on that. Maybe you'll have a little kimchi or sauerkraut on top of your patty. So those are a lot of fun. Also, looking at different populations. We just picked healthy people. What if we had picked some people for the study that had more room for improvement? That would have been a nice place to look also. So lots of potential for looking at this in different directions.
Yeah, and Ethan, I wanted to ask you about the kind of opportunity to leverage the health benefits of plant-based meat, not just in communicating to consumers, but communicating to institutional buyers of food products who might have a reason or more resources to go into the literature and kind of cut through the narrative. So maybe could you talk a little bit about why institutional food service might be an interesting opportunity, areas like schools, hospitals, prisons, military, et cetera?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I was talking to a colleague yesterday about this. There's just a sort of dichotomy where, you know, we're facing all this pressure on the consumer side in retail, where this message about being processed and so on and so forth has really gotten through, and we need to clean that up. Institutional, a little different. You know, you look at whether it's Aramark, Sodexo, Compass, you look at these large food providers, they're all headed in this direction. You look at universities, particularly in Europe, right, where these things don't have such an influence. You know, entire campuses are going plant-based by 2025. If you look at you know, even some of the fast food players in Europe, right, to go back to the consumer side, they're moving very quickly in this direction. So you have to pick the pockets where common sense can prevail and then try to erode some of the misinformation in those areas where it's dominant.
Yeah, and they might trust some of those food service providers more inherently as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, you want to build on that? So I'm really proud to say I'm on the scientific advisory board of the CIA. That would be the Culinary Institute of America. And they created something called the Menus of Change, which has spun off to be the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. And it is a blast working with chefs. And chefs order a crap ton of food, and that's the point they make in this annual Menus of Change meeting. Hey, suppliers out there, we're going to be driving the change in menus, and we work very specifically with the Stanford chefs in the dining halls, and they are all over this, looking at plant-based alternative meats, and more lentil dishes, and more salads, and more bowls, and things like that. So I think the institutional food setting is a great way to create a lot of demand, especially for college students, for young folks getting ready for the rest of the meals for the rest of their life, but also hospitals and schools and prisons. And yeah, it's a great area to be working in.
Yeah, and if you do need a sort of pick-me-up, if you're fighting every day like we are in the sector, just go to one of these college campuses. You know, I just dropped my daughter off at Syracuse, where she's going to study journalism. I was kind of like, you sure you want to do journalism? You see what they're doing to your dad? But but anyway, she's doing it. You know, you go into the little convenience store at the bottom of her dorm, and it's just full of plant-based options. You go to the cafeteria, there's beyond this, beyond that. You know, it's happening, and it's happening with young people. And so this takes me back to my favorite dark quote, which is Max Planck, the theoretical physicist. You know, and he said that sort of you don't ever really win scientific arguments. You know, like one paradigm isn't sort of going to defeat another. It's that the proponents of the old paradigm simply die. And so the sort of way that people paraphrase that is science advances one funeral at a time. And so, you know, I just plan to live a really long time and hang out with these kids.
Yeah, fair enough. And we will be hearing from students and chefs later during this conference, and I think we can win some people over, not just generationally as well. But Dr. Gardner, so in terms of areas we can build the information base, the evidence base in plant-based meat, do you have a kind of wish list of studies or information that either you might want to work on or other researchers might work on?
Yeah, the first one would be athletes. So we've got cardiometabolic outcomes, but what about all the people freaked out about getting enough protein? So we actually did a little pilot study at Stanford where we had 24 recreational athletes go vegan for a month, go plant-based meat for a month, and go omnivore for a month. And these are all students who had been, for 5 years at least, running and lifting. Nothing changed at all. They didn't get stronger, but that's because they'd been working out for 5 years. That was just their regular thing. But they got over the fear that somehow this would diminish their workout strength. So we're actually trying to replicate that now in this network of colleges that we have. I was on a conference call this morning. 5 different colleges are going to try to replicate this swap meet athlete where performance outcome is what we're interested in. And then the next one after that would be, instead of just having red meat versus plant meat or plant meat versus vegan, my next idea is red meat and vegan plus as much plant meat as you need. Because I think what's out there is, sure, we'd love people to eat lentils all the time. I've been trying this for 30 years, and they're not going to do it. There's a couple we shift, but I'll bet some are going to want not 2 servings a day, but 3 servings a day of plant meat. And some are going to be fine with 2, and some are going to want 1. So I'm very interested in sort of this range of where it could play a different role for different people instead of just let's put them in one bucket or the other. There's a really great intermediary role here, and maybe it is the gateway drug to lentils.
On the athlete front, we see that a lot. We had Chris Ball the other day in the office who's going to be coming up here and be a warrior, which is very exciting. And he's been doing this for years now, right? And one of the questions he always gets asked, are you still doing this? He said, yes, I'm still doing it. He said, and one of the things that really sticks with me whenever I talk to him is his conversation we have around him forgetting to ice. So when he went plant-based, so he's 38 years old now. He doesn't ice after practice. Guys who are 25 are just covered up in ice after practice. He's doing this because he feels he's not having as much inflammation, and he feels that's because of his diet. And God bless him, it's working. And he's playing at a really high level at 38. There's so many other athletes that if you tease down into what they're doing in the regimes, they're largely plant-based. It's cleaner fuel for their body. If you have to think about the animal's muscle, it's really not there necessarily for your consumption. It's there for the animal to do work, right? And so there's a lot of stuff in there that maybe isn't something that you want to have every day, right? And so athletes have figured that out, and they're putting this clean fuel into their body, and they're getting really good results, as well as taking care of their long-term, the longevity and their communities where they're coming from, where heart disease, diabetes, and cancer often are at higher rates. So it's a very positive thing, and that's why this whole misinformation campaign, Misdirect, it's not just about money, right? This is deceiving people into not making the changes that can help them and their families live longer, healthier, happier lives.
Yeah, that's great. And Ethan, one last question I think we have time for here. Let's look ahead to, say, 2035. What gets you really excited about alternative proteins from a nutritional perspective? Eat both. I love both.
The field's wide open. Yeah, I mean, working with these college kids, they're so excited. There's an alt protein club at Stanford. There's a Rethink Meat class that had 200 or 300 students. So the energy's just vibrant at Stanford looking into these issues. So lots of discoveries ahead.
A colleague of Christopher's years ago said something to me that just stuck in my head, and he's a cardiologist, and so we've been working on some things, which I can't share, but we're going to keep making this product in this field healthier and healthier, and that's what makes me so excited. We're pushing the envelope on ingredients in terms of trying to bring things into the products that are going to enhance human health, and we're doing it together with some of the best researchers in the world. And so we're not saying we're perfect, but we have the opportunity to get better and better, and we're doing that against a static target. The animal's biology isn't really changing at a rate that we can see, right? but we can change very quickly, and we can continue to get healthier, and that's what we're doing.
Can I just add one last note, which was such a pleasure to meet Ethan, because when we met and designed this study, he just said, you know, do the right study. If it comes out bad for me, we'll reformulate. I really want to know what happens. What is this product that we're making? And he totally took it to heart, and it totally worked. And then he said, okay, I know it already worked, but we're still going to lower the saturated fat more. So I've been really impressed working with you this whole time. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we'll end it with that. Yeah, thank you so much to our panelists. One minute for people who need to clear out before we get started here.
I'm going to run another rapid question, but
Okay.
I'll be 30 seconds.
Okay,
so
go
feel free to
ahead.
start.
Go ahead. All right, everybody, can you hear me? Let's try to get started on part 2 here now. Please, consolidate, make room if you can. Get some people seated, if possible. Yeah, hello. We're going to get started on part 2, everybody. Bring your conversations outside, please. Hello. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll start calling you out by name. Oh, awesome. Well, part 1 was a huge success. I think it's very apparent that plant-based meat is better for you. And now we're going to talk about, I think, why plant-based meat is better for us and better for society. Talk about the public health aspects, benefits, opportunities, and alternative proteins. So to kick us off, we have Brent Kim from the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, who's going to provide a primer on kind of the 10,000-foot view on this topic, and then we'll bring in some great entrepreneurs and scientists to continue the discussion. So Brent he earned his master's in global disease epidemiology from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where he now serves as a researcher at the Center for a Livable Future. Since joining the center in 2008, his work has spanned from farm to fork with published works on sustainable diets, climate change, industrial food animal production, food and agricultural policy, soil safety, urban food systems. His work has been featured in PopSci, The Guardian, HuffPost, NPR, and Newsweek. As a former computer scientist, digital artist, and high school educator, Brent has never lost his love for teaching and visual communication, which I think comes through in his presentation. So Brent, please come.
Hi, everyone. I'm only slightly less tall than Ethan, so I'm going to lower this a little bit. So I just want to start by saying I can't emphasize enough how important all of you are, whether you're an investor or an innovator or a communicator or a convener or a student or a scientist. The world desperately needs you to be doing what you're doing. So the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future is an interdisciplinary center based at the School of Public Health. And for over 25 years, one of the major foci of our research has been the public health and ecological harms of industrial animal agriculture. So how did we get here? This dashed line shows the number of pig farms in the United States from 1955 until now. You can see there's a decline from 1.8 million farms to a little under 100,000. So this is the point in my classroom where I would usually say this trend reflects the declining appetite for pork products among US consumers. And then I know my students are paying attention if they start to make confused faces. I say, wait, what did he just say? Right, so obviously there's another half to the story, and that is that the number of pigs per farm has increased dramatically from fewer than 100 to well over 1,000. So this trend toward fewer but larger operations is consolidation. It is a hallmark of industrialization, and as probably most of you know in this room, typical large operations in the United States today and elsewhere in the world can easily house thousands of cattle, hundreds of thousands of chickens, or tens of thousands of pigs in a single industrial scale operation. This is our prevailing model of animal protein production today. It is a system in which animals undergo bodily mutilation without any form of pain relief. They are housed in crowded conditions, standing atop their own manure, and they are prohibited from engaging in their natural behaviors. The problem with this system is that in the case of pigs and cows, the manure is flushed through slats in the floors and pumped out to liquid storage pits such as this one. The quantity of manure produced by animals in industrial agriculture in the United States exceeds that produced by all United States citizens combined by a factor of 40, right? So the scale and the magnitude of these operations is profound. In the United States alone, we slaughter 9 billion animals annually. So we've taken what is otherwise a valuable source of manure and created a waste problem out of it. To manage that waste, the manure is typically, if it's liquid, if it's sprayed, if it's dry manure from poultry, it's spread on nearby fields as a form of disposal. And in doing so, we are releasing drug residues, excess nutrients, viruses, bacteria, and heavy metals into our air, water, and our soil. Now, the public health concerns associated with these practices are heightened by the use of antibiotics at low doses into the feed and water of animals. So a series of studies in the 1950s found that feeding low doses of antibiotics to chickens caused them to gain weight faster and on less feed and on less time. And if you watch the videos from the 1950s, there's, that narrator who always has that high-pitched voice, and he says, perhaps someday soon we'll be feeding antibiotics to the feed of human children so that they may grow faster and stronger. The problem with this practice, of course, as many of you likely know, is that when you're administering low doses of antibiotics, it is enough to eliminate the susceptible strains of bacteria, whereas the resistant strains, in this case of survival of the fittest, in the absence of competition, then survive and multiply. When you have an antibiotic-resistant strain of bacteria, when it then infects a human, those antibiotic-resistant infections are then more costly to treat, more likely to require invasive surgery, and more likely to be fatal. Despite some small policy wins in the United States, which we can talk about, even after some modest reductions, the sales of antibiotics in the United States, 65% of those antibiotic sales go toward animals, not toward treating sick humans. One more point about that. In 2019, the number of deaths from antibiotic-resistant infections exceeded those from HIV and malaria combined. There's a quote from former WHO Director Margaret Chen. I find it particularly compelling. She said, I'm paraphrasing here, that we are headed toward a post-antibiotic era in which common infections will once again kill. In our own review of the scientific literature, we identified evidence of antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria in the facilities, in the manure storage pits, transported by flies, which are disease vectors, colonizing and infecting workers, downwind of the operations, blown out through the ventilation fans, colonizing and contaminating ground and surface waters, and infecting nearby communities, who are most often communities of color and/or low-income communities who often do not have the financial means to relocate when you have a factory farm in your backyard, and often don't have the political power to fight them when one is proposed in your own backyard. In addition to risks of infection, These are also major sources of respiratory hazards. An estimated 1 in 4 workers in these facilities have some form of respiratory illness. So this is very much a social justice and an environmental justice problem. And it's not just a rural problem either. There is evidence we know that there are antibiotic-resistant pathogens on cuts of retail meat. As you would expect, these go through the food supply chain, as well as on surfaces like cutting boards on which those are prepared. And that's putting consumers at risk. So just to give you an example, urinary tract infections are among the more common and costly antibiotic-resistant infections in the United States. And there is some small but compelling significant evidence that antimicrobial use on farms is linked to heightened risks of antibiotic-resistant urinary tract infections among consumers. So this is not just a problem for farms and rural communities. Antibiotic resistance is a problem for everyone. I've only talked about bacteria so far. That's really just the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully, a silver lining of the COVID pandemic, if you could even call it that, is that people are more aware of the likelihood that zoonotic diseases can be transmitted from animals to humans. And industrial animal agriculture is creating the optimal conditions for those viral pathogens to make the leap from animals to humans. So just to give you an example of why that's the case, pigs are unique that in their digestive tracts, they have receptors to both avian or bird strains of influenza A, as well as human strains of influenza. So in a rare policy win story here, the state of North Carolina banned or prohibited the construction of new factory farms. That was a win. Unfortunately, many producers responded by adding turkey CAFOs next to their swine CAFOs. So you have tens of thousands of hogs next to tens of thousands of birds, throw in some humans, and you have the optimal conditions for these viral strains to recombine inside the pig, creating a new viral strain that we've never had to deal with before that then makes the jump to humans. It is the scientific consensus that it is not a question of if we will have a new viral pandemic, but when we will have a new viral pandemic. And again, industrial animal agriculture is creating the optimal conditions for that jump to happen to humans. More than just disease risks, industrial animal agriculture is a source of nuisance to communities who live nearby. These are flies on a window outside of someone's home who lives near a swine operation. And we often hear from community members who will tell us they are unable to go outside because the odors are so strong that if they were to go out and inhale it, it would cause them to gag and throw up. I've talked a lot about meat. This is an egg layer operation that my colleagues and I visited in Arizona. We were there to take air quality measures in response to concerns from the community that this facility would be expanding to house over 12 million hens at maximum capacity. 12 million hens stacked in rows and columns. You can get a sense of the scale of the operation from the porta potty in the foreground. These are massive, the size of airplane hangars. You can see feathers littering the ground downwind from the ventilation fans. This was, in theory, a state-of-the-art humane operation because they were moving away from battery cages to give the chickens slightly more room. Despite that, we heard from community members that workers were throwing live birds into mechanical grinders if they were past the point at which they were producing enough eggs to be economically viable. It is also very telling that this operation was staffed almost exclusively by incarcerated individuals, prisoners. And it's, I don't know, what does it mean that this is a system that relies so heavily on the most vulnerable members of our population, incarcerated workers, as well as undocumented migrants who are operating these slaughterhouse facilities? So this is a system, for all of its harms, that has excelled in producing massive quantities of inexpensive protein. I say inexpensive, referring only to the retail price on the cut of meat. But when we account for the full social, health, and environmental costs of this system, it's extremely expensive. Antibiotic resistance is an extremely costly problem. Novel influenza is an expensive problem. The climate crisis, we haven't even talked about that today, easily the greatest public health crisis of our generation and future generations to come, is an exceedingly costly problem. I don't think there's any one single silver bullet solution to these problems, but the innovators who share this panel with us today are bringing us new options on the menu for solutions, developing alternative proteins, such as the ones shown here, that offer the promise of a kinder, safer, and more just food system. Now more than ever, we need their work, and we need your work as we stand on the precipice of multiple, irreversible public health and planetary crises. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. What a fantastic overview to get us going on this discussion, and yeah, really excited to bring in these really esteemed additional panelists to help us dive deeper into some of these topics and additional topics. I think there's a lot more we could even talk about in terms of the public health benefits here. So first, I'm really excited to introduce Tess Kelly, who joined Corn Foods as a health psychology graduate researcher in 2015, bringing her academic expertise in behavioral change and plant-based diets to the company. Tess has held diverse roles in teams spanning sustainability, nutrition, communication, and is now head of external engagement, working with company experts, youth champions, and thought leaders to build advocacy and partnerships to address the challenges of achieving a sustainable food system. Tess previously held the role of Sustainable Development Manager, leading the company's social impact agenda, science communications to healthcare professionals, and benchmarking and alignment to the Sustainable Development Goals as part of Corn Foods' 2030 net positive ambition. Tess is passionate about food justice and is currently studying towards its second master's degree in global food security and nutrition at the University of Edinburgh. Brett, make sure yours is off. Yeah, I don't know. I think there was some kind of echo there. Also, I'm very excited to bring in Amy Chen, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Upside Foods, a world-leading cultivated meat company, which is focused on growing delicious meat directly from real animal cells. As COO, Amy leads the brand's global strategy and commercial functions, including sales and marketing, finance and operations, product development, food safety, and public policy. She's also helping scale the company's technology and culture as it enters its next phase, following obtaining regulatory approval to sell its cultivated meat in the U.S., cultivated chicken in the U.S. Absolutely incredible. Prior to joining Upside Foods, Amy was SVP for PepsiCo Beverages North America, previously served as CMO for PepsiCo Snacks in the Greater China region, in addition to other sales ops, strategy, and innovation roles. She has an MBA and JD from Stanford and an undergraduate degree in chemistry from Harvard. And next to Dr. Aryé Elfenbein. Dr. Elfenbein co-founded Wildtype, a leading company developing cellular agriculture technologies for a clean and accessible seafood future. Dr. Elfenbein earned an MD and a Ph.D. at Dartmouth and Kyoto University and completed his clinical training in internal medicine and cardiology at Yale. Prior to co-founding Wildtype, he completed a fellowship in cardiovascular regenerative medicine at the Gladstone Institute in UCSF, and is as a classically trained cardiologist and musician. He also continues to practice critical care medicine and piano when he's away from Wildtype. Love that detail. And lastly, I'm very excited to welcome Sarah Ham to the stage. Sarah Ham is a startup veteran of over 20 years, the majority of which has been with mission-driven organizations. She's currently COO at the Every Company, which is the world's first company to commercialize highly functional egg proteins produced without chickens. She manages day-to-day operations and oversees the people, business operations, legal and finance teams, and has worked with numerous startups as an operating leader, advisor, and venture capital investor. She has an MBA from Yale and a bachelor from Stanford. So a very impressive group of people with a very wide variety of backgrounds here. So I think together, in addition to Brent's really great presentation, we can make sure that we've cataloged all of the public health benefits, or nearly all of the public health benefits of alternative proteins. So maybe starting with Amy, is there anything that we should mention that hasn't already been mentioned about the public health benefits of all proteins?
Thanks, Nate. It's great to be with all of you today, and I'd just start by echoing Brent's gratitude for everybody's passion and conviction here. We are up on the stage and out in the audience, all a group of people who are passionate about changing the world and committing our energy to do that, so grateful to be amongst friends. I think Brent did an amazing job, and a really sobering one, frankly, of reminding us why the work that we are doing is so urgent. I feel like I read these statistics every day and look at all of the reality, and every time I hear it like that, it's still an urgent reminder of why it has to be done today. There is no plan B. Our planet doesn't have a plan B, and we don't have a plan B, so we've got to make this one work. When you think about the challenges of the conventional system, I think Brent did a really great job of cataloging those. I'll spend just a few minutes maybe talking about why cultivated meat is different and why we're really excited about the promise of what can happen when you can grow meat from real animal cells. You deliver to consumers what they want first and foremost, which is an amazing, delicious product that tastes like meat. You can do it in a safe way, and you can do it in a way that's better for animals, better for the environment, and better for human health. Right? We're firm believers that upside, that it's important for consumers to have choice. And I think there's very few consumers out there who, when given a choice of a delicious product that is safe and of high quality and has all these advantages, would say, actually, I want my slaughtered animal that's going to suffer in inhumane conditions, in dirty places, and yeah, let me give me that one. There's really two big areas where I think cultivated meat can offer a significant advantage. One is how the product is produced, and the second is what the product can actually be. So if I start with how it's produced, you saw lots of riveting images and sobering ones of the current food system. You know, pan and fast forward, I invite you to Google on your phones our Upside EPIC facility, which is located a mere 10 miles away. It's called EPIC because it's an engineering, production, and innovation center. It is the world's most advanced cultivated meat processing facility, and it is located in the middle of a neighborhood, next to restaurants, attached to an apartment building, and in a walkable neighborhood. As an aside, we had a big joke because the mayor of the town we're located in is a big fan of ours and of innovation in general, and said, you know, I was thinking as part of the public permitting process that we should plaster the city with signs that there's a new meat processing slaughterhouse coming to town. And invite people to come and see what that's like. But if you do come or look on our website, it is not only in the middle of a neighborhood, it is glass and very transparent. We do public tours. You can see what it looks like on our website, and I would guarantee you there's not a slaughterhouse in the world that would want to put their processes out there. The fact that we can control the process from start to finish, from exclusive, extensive testing on the cells themselves to all the media and the cell feed components to a very clean, controlled environment in which the cells grow, mean that ultimately the resulting product, you know, can substantially reduce or even eliminate the risk of a lot of the issues that Brent talked about, things like E. coli or salmonella. Millions of Americans every year suffer from foodborne illnesses, and many of those come from the conventional meat that they consume. That's one thing. Then you think about the zoonotic diseases that Brent also mentioned. Another huge issue, when you remove slaughter and animals and slaughter from the process, you can detach that chain. I was living in China when the swine flu hit back in 2019 and wiped out a quarter of the world's pig supply, a quarter, right? And we don't want that to happen again, but as the professor mentioned, it's just a matter of time. But cultivated meat can help break that cycle. Then let's fast forward and say, what is the product itself, right? What can cultivated meat be? You've all heard the saying that you are what you eat, and that's absolutely true of our cells as well. We're still in the early days of learning how you exactly change and modify the feed to impact the nutritionals, but we know that there is a day where you can have a delicious, fabulous steak that has the nutritional profile of salmon. It's only a matter of time. So I'll pause there and just say I think that there are a tremendous number of overall public health benefits in addition to the broader conversation around environmental health and safety and justice that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that was really great. And why don't we go to Dr. Elfenbein as a physician and a cultivated seafood scientist, maybe if there's anything else we missed on the public health aspects of all proteins that we should highlight, or in addition to cultivated seafood, what are the benefits of that over conventional or aquacultured seafood?
Yeah, I mean, I think the context is just more expansive when it comes to some of the pervasive contaminants that we've just kind of learned to accept when it comes to seafood. So every time we sent out conventional seafood from the supermarket, it's had some of the things that we imagined it would have, like arsenic, mercury, these kinds of things. Friends of mine love sending me photos of when they're cooking some salmon and a little worm wriggles out. That's a pretty common thing. I know, it's gross. I collect these videos if anyone wants to send them to me. And so, like, you know, but this is just some of it. I think that actually a greater issue is one where we don't know. I mean, these are the contaminants we understand. There are all kinds of chemicals now flowing in all of our veins for molecules that haven't even been characterized yet, that are part of what production, not just for food, but for just other things. become part of our just general kind of society now. The amount of information that we have around those, we sort of focus on things like heavy metals and parasites because they're pretty clearly defined. But I think that what's going to emerge in the next couple of decades is a whole new set of overly complex molecules, chemicals that just have physiological activities that we're just now starting to understand. We're seeing a lot of this in the correlative studies of fertility over the past few decades, why those trends have gone in the way that they have. And I think that the unknown actually is one of the more difficult ones, aspects of what in our current system presents a public health hazard.
Yeah, great. And now we'll go to Tess. You might be sick of saying this by now, but I think the story of corn's founding and how it found the protein source was really incredible. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that story and also kind of what is next for corn from a nutritional perspective.
Sure, absolutely, and it's such a pleasure to be here, as others have said, around such great friends and great innovators, so it's a huge privilege to share the stage. It's a story we do tell often, and always an unusual feeling to be telling a story that you wasn't even born for, so we actually have to look all the way back to the 1960s for the origins of where corn and mycoprotein started. And really back then, we were in a similar position. We were struggling to come to terms with how we were going to address a sustainable food system in the future. But actually, the focus was really on how were we going to provide enough food for people, and particularly in the developing world. There were real concerns about protein shortages. There were books written on this topic. And of all people in all places, there was a philanthropist called Lord Arthur Rank, a northeastern Englishman who was the son of a flour miller. And he set out on an absolutely incredible journey of discovery to try and find the first new food since the potato, so the story goes. Quite an extraordinary vision at that time. So he had a team of scientists who set out looking across soil samples. Coming from a baking and flour dynasty, they'd already seen the potential of incredible microorganisms such as yeasts to transform nutrients into new food sources. So what they were looking for was a tiny organism, a tiny member of the fungi family that could take the then plentiful carbohydrate sources that we were seeing around the world and convert those into a really high quality protein that could make delicious food. Fast forward to now, we do exactly that. So our manufacturing facility is the largest in the world. We've been producing mycoprotein at scale for 40 years now, with another 35 years of scientific research really underpinning that discovery and all its incredible environmental and nutritional benefits. We start from a very different place than plants or cultivated meat, so we represent that really fascinating space of fungi, which are a unique kingdom. They bring unique benefits, and they bring something unique to the space of public health as well. So we're really excited that we're seeing more mycoprotein innovators joining the family, but certainly what's next on the horizon for us is to really start to understand a lot more about those unique health benefits. There's unique types of fiber, for example, that are inherent in fungi proteins versus plants or animals. And we're seeing some really interesting research coming out from our academic partners across muscle building, across protein quality, the gut microbiome. We were talking about, how exciting that is earlier. So there's still a huge amount there to really understand what the mechanisms of some of those positive changes actually are. So as Ethan said, we can harness those in the future and continue to make these products even better for people and for the planet.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I think we're at the very beginning of what some have called the second domestication, right? First domestication of plants and animals, and now we're just beginning to see what we can discover in the microbial multiple kingdoms, right? With their ability to externally digest, all kinds of amazing things that they can do because all the niches they operate. Kind of in a similar vein, I would like to transition to Sarah to talk about A little bit about this, kind of like the story of why the Every company came to exist and how you found ways to isolate the different functional parts of the egg in order to create better products.
So for those of you that don't know, although I am also honored to be among friends and among so many folks that have been working in this field for so long and paving the way. So first of all, thank you, and thanks Nate and everybody for having me. So for those of you that don't know much about the Every company, we are a B2B ingredients company. And we use fermentation to create proteins. And so we will be able to present is a vision far, I guess, more pleasant, safer, scalable than the very, very sad factory farm of the egg-laying hens that Brent showed earlier. Because we use fermentation, I don't know if those of you who don't know, the egg has about up to 200 proteins. And with our technology, we're able to isolate the benefits of the different proteins from a nutritional as well as functional standpoint. And sell those in as ingredients to improve food formulation. And so ultimately, to use alternative proteins to improve food systems from within the large food companies, which has led us to be a company where, at this point, with the sort of wide open lane for fermentation and regulatory approval and proven technology, we've already got products in market that take advantage of that. And so we've seen that we can go out there into baking and recreate use meringue and use our egg white proteins for meringue. We can be in alcoholic beverages and add benefit for protein in that. So I think that's a slight twist on where we can go and how much we can really do to feed the additional 2 billion people we're going to see, kind of building on the conversation that Ethan started earlier and Brent as well, on how we can do this in a safer and more scalable way.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like instead of bioprospecting out, you can also bioprospect in and look closer more at the cells. So also just a side note here, I've been told we can go a few minutes over the noon because we're running into lunch, so no one will think you're rude if you have a meeting you have to go to, but I think we can go a few minutes over and get through the questions that are burning. So I did want to ask about some of the, I guess you could say, social determinants of health or economic and social impacts of these technologies on, concerns over industrial concentration or being far away from the food source or the farm or something like that. So I don't know, Sarah, is that something that you've run into? And maybe Brent, you also have some interesting commentary.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was hearing Ethan talk about his son, I was thinking of my 5-year-old a couple days ago. And it's interesting you bring up this. We talk about, what Ethan was teeing it up really well, but when we talk about farms, farms are here to stay. It's the factory farms that should go away. And when I was thinking about my 5-year-old, it's because he asked me a couple days ago, because he's really into dinosaurs right now, and he knows that they went extinct, and he asked me how humans would go, functional equivalent of how do humans gonna go extinct. And I was like, I was driving, and I was like, but it's what I spend all my working day on. And I explained it to him, and after we talked about asteroids and how that was hopefully not gonna be an issue, is that we need to do as much with our food system to make sure that we don't send humans into extinction and solve this problem that my 5-year-old is racking his brain over. And that's really the conversation that we need to be having, is how to make sure that we use our arable land not for animal agriculture, but for reforestation, how we don't cut down the Amazon, how we make sure that we have safer, scalable solutions. And so, when it comes up with health, it's often about thinking of how do we make sure that we have alternatives to the factory farms that are ultimately really undermining our health as well as our nutrition, and using the products that are going to be able to feed us moving forward.
Nice.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Yeah. Before we continue, I just want to highlight, is this on? Testing, testing. I just want to highlight Tess's jacket. Has fungi on it.
Thank you.
Quite incredible. Yeah, just a couple points. You had mentioned earlier, like, how do we respond to some of the concerns about industry consolidation, right? So we have a lot of startups. There's also some development being done in the all-protein space that is being led by larger corporations. And this is a counterpoint or a concern that I hear often. And I think a lot of the debates and discussions around the merits of all proteins, in many cases, in my view, revolve less around the quality of the evidence and the data and the science, and more around worldview, right? So if you have someone who has a worldview through which they see corporations as bad, or industrialization as bad, or the application of technology to food as somehow unnatural or bad, then that person is going to lump in factory farms in with the same bucket as all proteins, even though we all know that they are profoundly different in terms of their impact on people, animals, and the planet. I think it's also often the case that the folks with that worldview tend to be the folks who are looking to nature for solutions. Not at all a bad idea, right? They're often the proponents of regenerative agriculture. But what happens that I see very often, which I think is unfortunate, is that the regenerative ag folks are often butting heads with the all protein folks. When in fact, we have a lot of common ground, right? We all agree about the harms of industrial animal agriculture, and we all agree that we need to reduce animal product intake. And you can't have regenerative agriculture without dramatically cutting back on how many animal products we're eating, because, to Sarah's point, the land use, there are ecological advantages of regenerative ag relative to factory farms, but it does require more land. So the land use footprint, we can't just keep eating the same quantities of meat we're eating and then just shift over and have everything come from a pasture-raised hen or whatever. So I guess, ideally I'd like us to get on the same page, but short of that, if nothing else, I think just being aware of our own worldview and the worldviews of others and where they're coming from could at least kind of help us to have dialogue and understand where other people are coming from. Because these problems are so complex and so entrenched that if we're spending our time infighting, that's time that we could otherwise be spent potentially working together to solve these problems. So.
Yeah, great points. And it was mentioned, the role that large corporations play in kind of molding this system that we're operating in. And Amy, as someone who came from that background, what role do you see large corporations playing in, and what responsibility do they have in creating a more healthy public health system, and how do we work with them?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nate. I am a big believer in the power of scale. There are massive food companies out there that have incredible reach, incredible infrastructure, and incredible touch. And I think it's really critical for us in burgeoning industries that are still building to recognize that there's opportunities to have a big tent approach, right? We're very open to the notion that there are infrastructure pieces that can be accelerated by existing players. We are fortunate enough to have as our investors folks like Tyson and Cargill, who you might not normally expect to be invested in a cultivated meat company that produces meat in a really, really different way than they traditionally do. But I think that's an indication that times are changing, and I take it as a very positive, optimistic sign that some of the world's largest players in protein understand that consumers are changing, consumers want choice, and ultimately, they don't need to be wed to a system if there's an alternative that's better and that's viable. So that's a really exciting part, I think, in terms of investing dollars, investing resources, infrastructure, supply chain. There's so many things that can be accelerated that we don't need to build from scratch. If every single one of us tried to build every aspect of the food system individually, it will never work. But when we join forces not only with each other, but with larger companies that are interested in making change, I think that's when real impact starts happening. I also think that big companies have access to consumers, and they can help propel the conversation forward, spreading right kinds of information to give consumers the information, the transparency, the visibility they need to make the right choices for themselves.
Nice, and maybe just a couple last ones to end on here. Dr. Elfenbein, imagine 2035 now, right? And alternative proteins are no longer the alternative. What does that mean for public health? How does the United States, maybe in particular, look different from that perspective?
So we're among friends, and I think I can say something that maybe I can't say outside of this room. I have an enormous amount of optimism for what 2035 looks like. I was thinking about this just a couple nights ago. I was in the ICU. It was about 3 in the morning. It was a little quieter, and was looking around at the different rooms. And remembering that just a couple of years ago during the pandemic, the greatest tragedies for me were people who were on ventilators after the vaccine had come out because they had been told that whatever idea the government was implanting a microchip in this vaccine to track their movements, or whatever reason it was, the underlying science, the reason why the vaccine was so effective, wasn't effectively communicated. And I think by 2035, there are few reasons to believe that's going to change. One of the things that I was reminded of is this quote. I think it's from Jonathan Swift, who said that you can't reason people out of an idea that they never reasoned themselves into. And that's a really powerful one for a lot of what we're describing here, that a lot of the what exists around ideas for nutrition today can feel a bit more like religion than science. And that's fine, but I think what we're looking towards in 2035 is exactly what Professor Gardner was describing, these just more information about the different food choices that we have. Most of our seafood in the US is imported. A lot of people are surprised to learn that. A lot of people are also surprised to learn that the majority of seafood that's even produced here goes overseas, usually to Asia, for processing before it comes back. And that's cheaper somehow. And that creates all kinds of issues of traceability and transparency. Everything that we're describing today and what 2035 looks like is a nutrition label with maybe 10 times as much information, meaningful information that actually has decades of data behind it so that we can understand our food choices, so we can understand what conventional meats are, so we can understand what actual alternatives there are out there, what is complementary, so we can actually make more informed decisions about what foods we have to nourish our bodies. And that's what 2035 looks like to me.
Nice, and maybe one more question, and Tess, you can take us home here, because I don't want us to get the impression that the market is just US, Europe, right? There's the majority of the population's in the global south, and as we're looking ahead to 10 billion people, how do we feed the world without making the protein deficit between countries worse? How can we think about helping basically those countries as they develop?
Yeah, and it's such an important question. It's not one that I think any of us take lightly, because this is massively multifaceted, and we are all going to have a very different role to play in that. I think what's certainly true at the moment that we can see is that our industry collectively is probably tuned more towards the dietary patterns and the challenges of developed nations and Western diets. And so I think there's a huge gap and opportunity there to really understand what is the next generation of application of various types of alternative protein in the right contexts, respectful of the right cultures. How do we include more communities in the development of those solutions as well? Because one of the worst things you can do is try and tell people what to eat, right? We know that never goes well. But saying that, I think some of the challenges that we are seeing, we still haven't solved increasing meat consumption here at home. And if we can really start to make a dent on that, just looking at mycoprotein as an example, if we replaced just 20% of global beef consumption, I think we can reduce deforestation by about 50%. That was published in Nature just last year, for example. So we can start to look at these wider impacts around freeing up land, about preserving subsistence farming. Traditional farming methods are going to be just as important as levers that we should champion, and also continue to highlight exactly what you did, Brett, in such a vivid way of the sort of systems that we want to help prevent spreading to those communities. So I think we'll have a very, very different role to play, but it's going to be an exciting challenge to do it together.
Yeah, we can, hopefully all proteins can provide a way to help certain markets avoid the follies of the Western diet and industrial system. So I think that's probably a good place to end it. Yeah, Brent, take us home.
Can't keep you captive for another 30 seconds. I just want to build on a point about land use because that's so important. Animal agriculture occupies 75%, 3/4 of the world's agricultural land. This is so important because to feed the growing population, we're going to need an estimated 50 to 60% increase in agricultural output. We can't do that because we're already using all the agricultural land we have without deforestation, and for deforesting, that's a climate disaster. So I think one of the many but most profound evidence-based advantages, I think, of all proteins is the much smaller land use footprint relative to animal agriculture. The other last point I want to make to bring it back to the broiler chicken example that Ethan talked about earlier. In the 1950s, I believe it was, there's a farmer on the Eastern Shore, I live in Maryland, named Cecil Steele. She placed an order, at that time, chicken was a luxury item. Lobster was the cheap thing that you could find anywhere, right? At that time, Cecil Steele, farmer on the Eastern Shore, placed an order for broiler chickens. Accidentally, somehow something got mixed up and added an extra 0 to the number of chickens she was going to get. She quickly went to 50 to 500 to 5,000 chickens. What now? Lobster is exceedingly expensive. Chicken is one of the cheapest, most abundant foods that we have. I think that's a powerful illustration when we hear from people and they ask questions about what about scaling, what about price. These are valid and relevant questions, but the chicken example reminds us that we can make the food system what we want it to be.
Yes. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you all for being here. Yep. Thank you.